This looks right, but I'll ask the A&P butcher.
Oh, come on, Lou. This is a supermarket, not a butcher shop.
Picture this. You're a kid in the 1950s and your mom says those magic words, "We're going downtown to the department store." Your heart races because this isn't just shopping. This is an adventure. The gleaming escalators, the perfume counter that made you dizzy, the toy department that felt like heaven on earth. These weren't just stores. They were palaces of wonder, cathedrals of commerce, places where you could buy everything from a refrigerator to a parakeet, get your hair done, have lunch, and maybe even catch a fashion show. Today we're counting down 20 forgotten department stores from the 1950s that have completely vanished from the American landscape. Some died slow deaths, others disappeared overnight, but all of them left behind millions of memories. So let's take a trip back to when shopping was an event and these retail giants ruled the world. Number 20. W.T. Grant. In 1906, William Thomas Grant had a simple idea. Open a store where nothing cost more than 25 cents. By the 1950s, his little idea had exploded into an empire of over 500 stores stretching from coast to coast. W.T. Grant wasn't just a department store. It was where middle America went to outfit their lives. They had everything. Clothes, furniture, appliances, toys, and they had something else too. Credit. Lots and lots of credit. Grant's was one of the first chains to really push store credit cards on regular folks. Want that new Philco television but can't afford it? No problem, just sign here. By 1975, they had $600 million in customer credit accounts, which sounds great until you realize most of that money was never coming back. The company expanded like crazy through the 60s and 70s, opening bigger and bigger stores. But bigger wasn't better. The new stores were losing money faster than the old ones could make it. In October 1975, they filed for bankruptcy. At the time, it was the second largest retail bankruptcy in U.S. history. Over 80,000 people lost their jobs. The last stores closed in February 1976. Today, there's virtually no trace of W.T. Grant, no nostalgic revivals, no documentary films, just memories of a store that once seemed too big to fail. Number 19. Gimbals. Nobody but nobody undersells Gimbals. That slogan was everywhere in the 1950s, on billboards, on radio, on those new television sets everyone was buying. And for a while, it was true. Gimbals was the Walmart of its day. A massive department store chain that prided itself on low prices and huge selection. The flagship store in New York took up an entire city block. 10 floors of everything you could imagine. They even had their own subway entrance. How's that for convenience? But Gimbals was more than just big. They were innovative. They created the Thanksgiving Day Parade. Well, technically, they created the first one. In 1920, they marched animals from the Central Park Zoo down to their Herald Square store. Macy's liked the idea so much, they started their own parade 4 years later. And yes, there was a rivalry. A massive rivalry. The two stores sat just blocks apart in Manhattan, constantly trying to outdo each other. If Macy's put something on sale, Gimbals would beat the price within hours. They had spies in each other's stores. It was retail warfare. The 1947 movie Miracle on 34th Street was basically about this rivalry. Except in the movie, they learned to get along. In real life, not so much. By the 1970s, Gimbals was struggling. They couldn't compete with suburban malls and discount chains. In 1986, after 144 years in business, they closed for good. The flagship store is now a mall with a Kmart in it. Talk about irony. Number 18. E.J. Corvette. Eugene Furkauf was a World War II veteran with a crazy idea. What if you took a department store and made everything cheap? Not just some things, everything. In 1948, he opened E.J. Corvette in a second-floor loft in Manhattan. The name didn't stand for anything fancy. E.J. was Eugene Joseph. Corvette was just a play on Corvette, which sounded fast and modern. Within a decade, Corvettes had revolutionized retail. They were the first true discount department store. They sold brand name merchandise at prices that made other retailers furious. How furious? Manufacturers actually tried to stop selling to them. It led to a Supreme Court case. Corvettes won. By the 1950s, they were expanding everywhere. Massive stores with massive parking lots. They sold everything from diamonds to dishwashers, and they sold it cheap. Their record department was legendary. Kids would spend hours flipping through albums. They had listening booths where you could hear records before buying them. For teenagers in the 50s and 60s, Corvettes was where you went to buy the latest Elvis or Beatles album. But success bred problems. They expanded too fast. Quality control went out the window. Customer service became a joke. By the 1970s, they were bleeding money. In 1980, they closed their last store. Eugene Furkauf lived to see his empire crumble. He died in 2012 at age 91. In his later years, he admitted he'd expanded too quickly. "I got greedy," he said. Simple as that. Number 17. Two Guys. Here's a name that sounds like it was thought up in 5 seconds. Two Guys, that's it. Just two guys. Originally, it was two guys from Harrison because the founders were, well, two guys from Harrison, New Jersey. Brothers Herbert and Sidney Hubschman started with a simple plan in 1946: buy surplus merchandise from the government and sell it cheap, real cheap. Their first store was in a former supermarket. Nothing fancy, just tables piled high with random stuff. Tools, clothes, small appliances, whatever they could get their hands on. But people loved it. By the 1950s, Two Guys had evolved into full-scale department stores. Massive ones. We're talking 150,000 square feet of retail space. They sold furniture, carpeting, major appliances, clothing, jewelry, sporting goods. They had automotive centers, garden centers, some stores, even had supermarkets attached. Their slogan was, "Two Guys has it for less," and they meant it. They'd sell a television for $50 less than anyone else. How? Volume. They'd buy 10,000 TVs at a time. Their stores were always packed, especially on weekends. It was chaos. Beautiful, profitable chaos. But the 1970s killed them. Competition from Kmart and other discounters, rising costs, bad management decisions. In 1982, they filed for bankruptcy. The last stores closed in 1983. Today, most people under 50 have never heard of Two Guys. But in New Jersey, mention the name to anyone over 60 and watch their eyes light up. "Oh yeah," they'll say, "Two Guys. That place was incredible." Number 16, Alexander's. In 1928, George Farkas had a problem. He owned a small luggage store in the Bronx and nobody was buying luggage. So he did what any sensible businessman would do. He started selling everything else. Dresses, coats, shoes, whatever people actually wanted. He named the store Alexander's after his father. By the 1950s, Alexander's had become the place where New York's working class went to look rich. They specialized in designer knockoffs. You couldn't afford a real Dior dress? No problem. Alexander's had something that looked almost exactly like it for a tenth of the price. Their flagship store on Fordham Road in the Bronx was massive, 6 floors of merchandise. On Saturdays, you could barely move. The escalators were jammed, the dressing rooms had lines, the cash registers never stopped ringing. But Alexander's real genius was location. They built stores in neighborhoods other chains ignored. The Bronx, Queens, working class areas where people had champagne tastes on beer budgets. They even had a store on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, right on Lexington Avenue. Talk about chutzpah. The beginning of the end came in the 1980s. Donald Trump bought a chunk of the company. Power struggles ensued. Stores started closing. By 1992, they were done. The Fordham Road store is now a shopping center. The Manhattan store was demolished. In its place, a Bloomberg building. From discount dresses to billionaire offices. That's New York for you. Number 15. Ames started in 1958 when two brothers, Milton and Irving Gilman, opened a discount store in an old mill in Southbridge, Massachusetts. Their timing was perfect. The 1950s were ending, and Americans were moving to the suburbs in droves. They needed places to shop that weren't downtown. Ames gave them exactly that. By the 1960s, Ames was expanding rapidly across New England. Their strategy was simple, but brilliant. Find a small town that Kmart and Walmart ignored. Open a store, become the only game in town. It worked beautifully for decades. In small towns across the Northeast, Ames was where you bought everything. School clothes, Christmas presents, lawn furniture. They had layaway programs that let cash-strapped families buy things over time. They sponsored Little League teams. They were part of the community. But then they made a fatal mistake. In 1988, they bought Zayre, another discount chain. Zayre was bigger but sicker. It was like swallowing poison. The debt was crushing. The bad locations were hemorrhaging money. They never recovered. Bankruptcy in 1990, again in 2001. The final death blow came in 2002. All 327 stores closed. Over 20,000 people lost their jobs. In many small towns, nothing replaced Ames. The buildings still stand empty, weeds growing through the parking lots, monuments to a retailer that tried to get too big too fast. Number 14. Bonwit Teller. If Alexander's was where the working class shopped, Bonwit Teller was where the wealthy went to spend serious money. Founded in 1895, by the 1950s, it was one of the most prestigious department stores in America. Their Fifth Avenue flagship was an Art Deco masterpiece. The elevator operators wore white gloves. The salespeople spoke in hushed tones. This wasn't just shopping, it was theater. Audrey Hepburn shopped there. So did Grace Kelly. Jackie Kennedy was a regular. They didn't just sell clothes, they sold dreams. Dreams with price tags that could make you faint. But those price tags came with quality that lasted forever. A Bonwit Teller coat wasn't just a coat, it was an investment. Their window displays were legendary. Artists competed to design them. People would travel to New York just to see what Bonwits had in their windows for Christmas. Andy Warhol worked there as a window dresser in the 1950s. That's right. Before he was famous, Warhol was arranging mannequins at Bonwit Teller. The decline started in the 1970s. Luxury retail was changing. Department stores seemed old-fashioned. Designer boutiques were the new thing. Bonwits tried to adapt but couldn't. In 1979, Donald Trump bought their flagship building and tore it down to build Trump Tower. The demolition was controversial. The building's Art Deco facades were supposed to be preserved for the Metropolitan Museum. They were destroyed accidentally. The last Bonwit Teller closed in 1990. From 16 stores to 0. From serving presidents' wives to serving nobody. That's retail for you. Number 13, Goldblats. In 1914, Polish immigrants Maurice and Nathan Goldblatt opened a small store on Chicago's west side. They called it Goldblats. Their customers were mostly Eastern European immigrants like themselves, people who worked hard and watched every penny. The Goldblatt brothers understood these people because they were these people. By the 1950s, Goldblatts had become a Chicago institution. They had stores all over the city and suburbs, but they never forgot their roots. While other department stores chased wealthy customers, Goldblatts stayed focused on the working class. Their prices were low, really low, but they made up for it in volume. On Saturdays, their stores were madhouses, especially the flagship State Street store, 6 floors of bargains. The basement was legendary. That's where they put stuff that was already cheap and marked it down even more. Damaged goods, last season's styles, weird sizes. People would dig through bins like they were mining for gold. Goldblatts also pioneered something that seems obvious now but was revolutionary then. They stayed open on Sundays. In the 1950s, most stores were closed on Sundays, but Goldblatts realized their customers worked Monday through Saturday. Sunday was their only day to shop, so they stayed open. The competition was furious. There were lawsuits, blue laws were invoked, but Goldblatts won. The beginning of the end came when they sold out to a larger company in 1981. The new owners didn't understand Chicago, they didn't understand the Goldblatts customers. By 2000, they were gone. The State Street store is now a dormitory. Students sleep where shoppers once hunted for bargains. Number 12, Jamesway. Jamesway started in 1961, but its roots went back to the 1950s retail revolution. The founders, Herbert Fisher and Mervyn Vish, had worked at other discount chains. They saw what worked and what didn't. When they opened their first Jamesway in Jamestown, New York, they thought they had the formula figured out. And for a while, they did. Jamesway expanded carefully through rural New York, Pennsylvania, and other northeastern states. They targeted small towns, just like Ames. But their approach was different, warmer, friendlier. The stores were bright and clean. The employees actually smiled. It sounds basic, but in the discount retail world of the 1960s and 70s, friendly service was revolutionary. They had a great gimmick, too. Every Jamesway had a snack bar, not a fancy restaurant, just a little counter where you could get a hot dog and a Coke. But those snack bars became community gathering places. Seniors would meet there for coffee. Kids would beg their parents for a soft pretzel. It was brilliant. Keep people in the store longer, they buy more stuff. By the 1980s, Jamesway had over 130 stores. They were profitable. They were growing. Everything looked great. Then Walmart arrived. Walmart was bigger. Walmart was cheaper. Walmart was ruthless. Jamesway tried to compete, but couldn't. They filed for bankruptcy in 1993. Within 2 years, every store was closed. The bankruptcy was particularly brutal. Right before Christmas 1994, thousands of employees were told they were losing their jobs. No warning, no severance, just Merry Christmas. You're unemployed. In many small towns, the Jamesway closing was devastating. It wasn't just losing a store. It was losing jobs, losing a gathering place, losing a piece of the community. Number 11, Woolco. Woolco was Woolworth's attempt to get into the discount department store game. Launched in 1962, it was supposed to be the next evolution of the five and dime concept. Take everything people loved about Woolworths and make it bigger. Much bigger. The first Woolco opened in Columbus, Ohio. It was massive. 120,000 square feet of retail space. For comparison, a typical Woolworths was maybe 10,000 square feet. This was a whole different animal. They sold everything. Clothing, electronics, furniture, sporting goods, toys, automotive supplies. They had pharmacy departments, photo centers. Some stores even had grocery sections. It was one-stop shopping before that became a cliche. By the mid-1970s, Woolco had over 300 stores across America. They were particularly strong in the Midwest and South. In many towns, Woolco was the biggest employer, the anchor of the local shopping center, the place where teenagers got their first jobs. But success bred complacency. While Woolco was celebrating their growth, Walmart was plotting their destruction. Sam Walton studied Woolco carefully. He hired away their executives, he copied their best ideas and improved on them. By the early 1980s, Woolco was in trouble. In 1983, Woolworths threw in the towel. They closed all the US Woolco stores. Walmart bought many of the locations. It was like a wolf buying the henhouse. Overnight, 336 stores closed. 50,000 people lost their jobs. In many towns, the Woolco closing was the beginning of the end for the local shopping center. Without that anchor store, other businesses failed. Parking lots emptied. Communities withered. Number 10. Bradley's started in New London, Connecticut in 1958. The founders picked the name because it sounded vaguely British and classy. There was no Bradley, no Lee, just a made-up name that looked good on a sign. But the name was the only fancy thing about Bradley's. Everything else was pure discount retail. Low prices, basic stores, no frills. And people loved it. By the 1960s, they were expanding rapidly across the Northeast. Their timing was perfect. The suburbs were exploding. Shopping centers were popping up everywhere. And every shopping center needed an anchor store. Bradley's was happy to oblige. They had a great slogan. Nobody but nobody undersells Bradley's. Sound familiar? They stole it from Gimbals, but they made it their own. And for a while, it was true. Their prices were insanely low. Their buyers were legendary for finding deals, designer clothes with the labels cut out, slightly damaged furniture, last year's electronics. If there was a deal to be made, Bradley's made it. The stores themselves were nothing special. Fluorescent lights, concrete floors, racks and racks of merchandise. But that was part of the charm. You weren't paying for fancy fixtures, you were paying for the stuff. In the 1970s and 80s, Bradley's was a weekend ritual for millions of families. Dad would check out the tools, mom would browse the clothes, kids would beg for toys, then everyone would meet at the checkout lines, which were always long. Always. But the 1990s were brutal. Competition from Walmart and Target, bad expansion decisions, too much debt. They filed for bankruptcy in 1995, limped along for a few more years, finally gave up in 2001. The last 105 stores closed in March 2001. No fanfare, no going out of business parties, just locked doors and empty parking lots. Number 9, Caldor. Caldor was founded in 1951 by Carl and Dorothy Bennett. The name came from combining their first names. Carl, Dorothy, Caldor, simple. The first store was in Port Chester, New York. It was tiny, maybe 2,000 square feet. But the Bennetts had big dreams. By the late 1950s, they were ready to expand. They opened larger stores, added more merchandise, kept prices low. The formula worked. Caldor grew. Steadily through the 1960s and 70s, they weren't the biggest, they weren't the flashiest, but they were reliable, consistent. In the crowded Northeast retail market, that counted for a lot. Their stores had a distinctive look, red and white signs, wide aisles, bright lighting, everything was organized logically. You could find what you needed quickly. Again, it sounds basic, but many discount stores were chaotic messes. Caldor was orderly, suburban families loved them. They had everything you needed for back-to-school shopping. Christmas presents, random Tuesday night purchases. The prices were good, the quality was decent, the locations were convenient. What more could you want? Apparently, a lot. Because by the 1990s, Caldor was struggling. They'd expanded too aggressively into unfamiliar markets, taken on too much debt, made too many bad decisions. Bankruptcy in 1995. They emerged, but weakened. Bankruptcy again in 1999. This time, there was no emerging. The last stores closed in May 1999. 145 stores, 18,000 employees, all gone. Many of the buildings became Targets or Walmarts. The predators moved into the praised territory. Number 8. Service merchandise. Service merchandise was weird. Gloriously, wonderfully weird. It was a catalog showroom, which was a concept that made perfect sense in the 1960s and makes absolutely no sense today. Here's how it worked. You'd walk into the store and see displays of merchandise, but you couldn't just take stuff off the shelf. Instead, you'd fill out a little form with the item numbers, hand it to a clerk, then wait while someone in the back warehouse found your stuff and sent it down a conveyor belt. It was like ordering from a catalog, but in person, with waiting. Lots of waiting. The company actually started in 1934, but the catalog showroom concept didn't take off until the 1960s. By then, Americans were used to shopping from catalogs. Sears, Montgomery Ward. But those required mail orders and weeks of waiting. Service merchandise gave you the catalog experience instantly. Well, almost instantly. The waiting area was an experience. Plastic chairs, harsh lighting, an electronic board showing order numbers. You'd sit there watching the numbers change, waiting for yours to appear. It was like the DMV, but for shopping. Despite the weird format, people loved service merchandise. They had great prices on jewelry, electronics, and housewares. Their Christmas catalog was legendary. Kids would spend hours circling toys they wanted. Parents would brave the crowds to get them. By the 1980s, they had over 300 stores, but the catalog showroom concept was dying. People wanted instant gratification. They wanted to touch products before buying. They definitely didn't want to sit in plastic chairs waiting for a conveyor belt. Service merchandise tried to adapt. They put more merchandise on the floor, streamlined the ordering process, but it was too late. Bankruptcy in 1999. The last stores closed in 2002. The conveyor belt stopped running. The waiting was finally over. Number 7, Hills Department Store started in 1957 in Youngstown, Ohio. The founder, Herbert H. Goldberger, had a simple philosophy. Sell stuff cheap in big stores with huge parking lots. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked. By the 1960s, Hills was expanding across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. They targeted blue-collar communities, steel towns, coal towns, places where people worked hard for their money and wanted it to stretch. Hills understood these customers. They sold work clothes that could take a beating, toys that could survive multiple kids, appliances that would last for decades. Nothing fancy, just solid stuff at fair prices. The stores were huge. We're talking 80,000 to 100,000 square feet. They had wide aisles you could navigate with a shopping cart, bright lights so you could actually see what you were buying, and most importantly, they had inventory, lots of it. Hills was famous for their layaway program. You could put items on hold and pay for them over time. No credit check, no interest. Just make your payments and get your stuff when it was paid off. For working families, it was the only way to afford Christmas or back-to-school shopping. They also had great snack bars, not fancy, just basic American food. Hot dogs, pizza, soft pretzels. But after a long shopping trip, that Hills pizza tasted pretty good, especially to kids who'd been dragged around the store for hours. The beginning of the end came in 1985 when they bought a chain called Gold Circle. Bad move. Gold Circle was losing money. The debt crushed Hills. They never recovered. Bankruptcy in 1991. Ames bought most of the stores, which, as we already covered, didn't work out great for Ames either. It was like a sick patient buying another sick patient. Nobody got better. Number 6, Venture stores started in 1970, which technically makes it a 70s creation, but its DNA was pure 1950s discount retail. The founders were executives from other chains who thought they could do it better. For a while, they were right. Based in St. Louis, Venture expanded carefully through the Midwest. They weren't trying to conquer America, just dominate their region. Smart strategy. They knew their territory, understood their customers. The stores were clean, bright, and well organized. They sold the usual department store mix: clothes, electronics, housewares, toys. But they did it with a bit more style than typical discounters. The clothes were actually fashionable. The electronics were current models. It was discount retail for people who didn't want to feel like they were shopping discount. Venture also pioneered something that seems obvious now. They put their stores in good locations, prime real estate, easy highway access, plenty of parking. While other discounters were building in cheap locations on the edge of town, Venture was right where people wanted to shop. By the 1990s, they had 93 stores across the Midwest. They were profitable, they were growing, everything seemed fine. But retail is brutal. Walmart and Target were invading their territory. Kohl's was stealing their slightly upscale customers. Venture was caught in the middle. They filed for bankruptcy in 1998. Within months, every store was closed. The liquidation sales were epic. People lined up for hours to get final markdowns. The good locations were quickly snapped up by other retailers. Today, you might be shopping in a Target or Kohl's that used to be a Venture. The building recycled, the memories discarded. Number 5. Jefferson Ward. Jefferson Ward was Montgomery Ward's attempt to get into the discount game without tarnishing their main brand. Launched in the late 1950s, it was supposed to be hipper, younger, more with it than stodgy old Montgomery Ward. The first stores opened in the southeast. The name Jefferson was chosen to sound vaguely southern and respectable, because apparently Montgomery wasn't southern enough despite being named after the capital of Alabama. The stores were smaller than full Montgomery Ward department stores, but bigger than typical discount stores. They were aiming for a sweet spot, better than pure discount, cheaper than full department store. It was a tough needle to thread. For a while, it worked. Jefferson Ward expanded through the 1960s and 70s. They had stores from Florida to Texas. In many mid-sized southern cities, Jefferson Ward was the best store in town. Not the biggest, not the cheapest, but the best combination of selection and price. They were particularly strong in clothing. While Kmart was selling generic jeans, Jefferson Ward had actual brands. While department stores were charging full price, Jefferson Ward had deals. They found a niche. But niches have a way of disappearing. By the 1980s, the retail landscape was changing. You were either a full-price department store or a deep discounter. There was no middle ground. Jefferson Ward was stuck in no man's land. Montgomery Ward pulled the plug in 1985. All Jefferson Ward stores either closed or converted to regular Montgomery Wards, which, as we all know, didn't survive much longer either. It was like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship was sinking. Changing the name on the chairs didn't help. Number 4. Zayre. Zayre was founded in 1956 by two brothers, Stanley and Sumner Feldberg. The name supposedly came from the Yiddish word Zayre, meaning very, as in very good prices. Or maybe it just sounded catchy. Either way, it worked. The first Zayre opened in Hyannis, Massachusetts. Within 2 years, they had stores across New England. Their growth was explosive. By 1962, they were operating 27 stores. By 1969, over 100. By the late 1970s, nearly 300. They were one of the fastest growing retailers in America. Zayre had a distinctive look: orange and brown signs, harsh fluorescent lighting, concrete floors. It wasn't pretty, but it was cheap. Really cheap. They sold everything at rock bottom prices. The quality wasn't great, but when you're paying $2 for a shirt, you don't expect miracles. Their slogan was, "Compare, you can't do better than Zayre." And for pure price, it was often true. They'd sell things at a loss just to get people in the door. Once you were there, you'd buy other stuff. It was retail psychology at its most basic. But Zayre's real legacy isn't Zayre. It's what came from Zayre. In 1988, they sold their nameplate stores to Ames and reorganized around their more successful subsidiary, TJX Companies, which owns TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and Home Goods. So in a weird way, Zayre lives on, just without the orange signs and concrete floors. The original Zayre stores died with Ames in 2001, but the company DNA survived, mutated, thrived. Sometimes in retail, you have to kill your past to secure your future. Number 3, Grand Union started as a grocery store in 1872. But by the 1950s, many locations had evolved into combination grocery and department stores. These weren't just places to buy milk and bread. They were full retail experiences. The department store sections sold clothing, toys, electronics, housewares, everything a growing suburban family needed, all under one roof. With groceries too, it was convenience shopping before anyone used that term. The combination format was particularly popular in smaller cities and towns, places that couldn't support separate department stores and supermarkets. Grand Union gave them both: one stop, one parking lot, one shopping trip. In the 1950s and 60s, this was revolutionary. Imagine doing all your shopping in one place, groceries in one section, school clothes in another, a new toaster 2 aisles over. For busy suburban mothers, it was paradise. The stores were massive by 1950s standards, sometimes 50,000 square feet or more. They had to be big to fit everything. The grocery section alone would be huge. Then add clothing departments, toy sections, hardware areas. It was organized chaos, but Grand Union couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Grocery store, department store, both, neither. By the 1970s, most locations had dropped the department store sections. They focused on groceries. The experiment was over. Those who remember the combination stores speak of them fondly. It was shopping as adventure. You never knew what you'd find. One week they'd have the winter coats, the next week bicycles. It was retail jazz, improvised, unpredictable, exciting. Grand Union limped along as a grocery chain until 2001, but the glory days of the combination stores were long gone. Another retail experiment that burned bright and faded fast. Number 2, Whitefront. Whitefront was Southern California's answer to the discount department store craze. Founded in 1959, it was the brainchild of Saul and Robert Guerin. They painted their stores white, hence the name. Sometimes the simple ideas are the best, or at least the most literal. The stores were massive. We're talking 150,000 square feet or more. Football fields of retail space. They sold everything. Furniture, appliances, clothing, sporting goods, automotive supplies, toys, electronics. If it existed, Whitefront probably sold it, and they sold it cheap. Their marketing was aggressive, full-page newspaper ads, radio commercials, television spots. The jingle was everywhere. Whitefront, Whitefront, that's the place to go. It was annoying, it was catchy, it worked. By the mid-1960s, Whitefront was dominating Southern California. They had stores from San Diego to Bakersfield. On weekends, the parking lots were jammed. Inside was controlled chaos, mountains of merchandise, crowds of shoppers, harried employees trying to keep up. But Whitefront had ambitions beyond California. Each expansion stretched their resources thinner. Each new market was less successful than the last. The end came suddenly. In 1975, they were sold to Interstate department stores. Interstate was already in trouble. They'd bought too many chains, taken on too much debt. Whitefront was supposed to save them. Instead, it was like tying two drowning people together. Within months, Interstate filed for bankruptcy. Whitefront was liquidated, the stores closed, the white paint faded. Today, most Californians under 50 have never heard of Whitefront, but mention it to older residents and watch their faces. "Oh man," they'll say, "Whitefront, that place was insane." And then they'll tell you about some amazing deal they got there, because everyone who shopped at Whitefront had at least one great score. Number 1, Masters. Masters Department Store was the crown jewel of 1950s Midwest retail. Founded in 1923 in Trenton, Missouri by Russian immigrant Samuel Master, he added the S to sound more American, it grew from a single small shop to become the most beloved regional chain nobody outside the Midwest has ever heard of. By the 1950s, Masters had achieved something remarkable. They'd found the perfect balance between department store elegance and discount store prices. The stores were beautiful, marble entrances, crystal chandeliers, carpeted floors, but the prices were reasonable. Not dirt cheap, but fair. It was department store shopping for regular people. Masters occupied massive downtown buildings in cities like Kansas City, St. Louis, Omaha, and Des Moines. We're talking 6, 7, 8 floors of retail magnificence. They had doormen in uniforms, elevator operators who announced each floor's contents. Third floor, ladies' fashions, cosmetics. But Masters' real genius was understanding their customers. Midwest farmers coming to the city wanted to feel special. Factory workers wanted quality that would last. Housewives wanted both beauty and value. Masters gave them all of it. They had services other stores couldn't match. Personal shoppers who remembered your name and size. They'd hold items for months if you needed time to pay. During harvest season, they'd even take grain as partial payment. Try doing that at Macy's. Their Christmas displays were legendary. The Kansas City store's window displays drew crowds from 3 states. They'd unveil them the night before Thanksgiving. Thousands would line up in the cold just to see them. Local newspapers would run photo spreads. It was an event. The toy department was every kid's dream. 8,000 square feet of wonders. Model trains that ran on elevated tracks around the ceiling, doll displays that looked like miniature cities, a live Santa who actually seemed to enjoy his job. They gave out free candy canes that were peppermint perfection. But Masters made a fatal error. They stayed downtown too long. While competitors fled to the suburbs, Masters doubled down on their urban locations. They spent millions renovating their flagship stores, making them even grander, even more beautiful, even more irrelevant. By 1968, the parking situation downtown was impossible. Customers were defecting to suburban malls. The stores that had once been packed were eerily empty. You could hear your footsteps echo on those beautiful marble floors. The end was swift and brutal. In December 1972, right before Christmas, Masters announced they were closing. All stores. Immediately, no warning, no liquidation sales, just locked doors and pink slips. 49 years of retail history ended overnight. The building stood empty for years. Some were demolished, others converted to offices or condos. The Kansas City store became a parking garage. Imagine that, where families once made memories, cars now sit in silence. But here's the thing about Masters. 50 years after they closed, people still talk about them. In nursing homes across the Midwest, mention masters and eyes light up, stories flow. That Easter dress from 1955, that first grown-up coat from 1961, that perfect wedding gift from 1967. They remember the elevator operators' names, the smell of the perfume counter, the taste of those candy canes. Because Masters wasn't just a store, it was where life happened. First bras, prom dresses, wedding registries, baby furniture. It was where you went when life's big moments needed proper recognition. And that's what we've really lost. Not just stores, but places where shopping was an event, where buying something meant something, where the journey mattered as much as the destination. These 20 stores represent millions of jobs lost, billions in vanished wealth, entire communities disrupted. But more than that, they represent a way of life that's gone forever. The downtown shopping trip, the all-day retail adventure, the personal service, the sense of occasion. Today we click, tomorrow it arrives. Efficient, yes. Convenient, absolutely. But magical, not even close. And there you have it. 20 department stores that defined shopping in the 1950s and then vanished like morning mist. Some died fast, some died slow, but they all died. And with them went a piece of America that we'll never get back. Did we miss your favorite extinct store? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the places where your family made memories. And if you enjoyed this trip through retail history, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more forgotten stories from America's past. Until next time, remember, those stores might be gone, but the memories remain. And sometimes that's enough.